The stars look different from out here. Captain Sam Miller stared at the view screen of the U.S. Defiant, Earth's most advanced experimental spacecraft. After 3 weeks of travel using the new quantum displacement drive, they had gone farther than any human in history. "Status report," Miller said, his voice steady despite the tension he felt. "All systems normal, Captain," replied Lisa Collins, the ship's engineer. She brushed a strand of blonde hair from her face as she studied her console. "The quantum drive is stable, though I'm still not convinced it should be." Miller nodded. The quantum displacement technology was new and untested in deep space. Many scientists back home had laughed at the very idea, calling it a waste of resources, but here they were, proving it worked. Frank Summers, the tactical officer, suddenly straightened in his chair. "Captain, I'm detecting objects at bearing 047. They're moving in formation." Miller felt his heart rate increase. "First contact. This is what we came for." "Put it on screen." The view screen shifted to show 3 sleek vessels. They were unlike anything built by human hands. Their hulls seemed to shimmer with an iridescent glow, and they moved with impossible grace. "Open communications," ordered Miller. "All frequencies, universal greeting package." Communications Officer Peter Webb worked his console. "Transmitting now, sir." Minutes passed in tense silence. The crew of the Defiant watched as the alien ships drew closer, scanning them with invisible beams. "They're responding," Webb announced, surprise evident in his voice. The view screen changed to show a humanoid figure with pale blue skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, the ship's computer translated. "I am Commander Yex of the Valkyrian Empire Scout Division. Your presence has been noted, primitive species." Miller stood straighter. "I am Captain Sam Miller of the United Earth vessel Defiant. We come in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Friendship, with beings who have barely left their own star system. Your technology is amusing. Our scans show your propulsion system is highly unstable. It's remarkable you haven't destroyed yourselves already." Collins muttered under her breath. "Well, that's rude." "We may be new to deep space," Miller responded, "but we're quick learners. We hope to establish peaceful relations with all species we encounter." Commander Yex's expression shifted to something colder. "The Valkyrian Empire does not establish relations with lesser species. We rule hundreds of star systems. Civilizations far more advanced than yours have become our subjects. Your choices are simple: submit to Valkyrian authority, or face extinction." Miller felt the mood on the bridge shift from excitement to dread. "Surely there's room for discussion. We pose no threat to you." "Correct. You pose no threat." The alien commander enlarged an image of the Defiant on his screen. "Your vessel's design is laughable. Your weapons are primitive. That you would even venture into space with such inferior technology shows either great courage or profound stupidity." Summers tensed at his station. "Captain, they're powering weapons." Miller kept his eyes on the alien commander. "We have no hostile intentions. Please stand down." "Consider this a demonstration," Yex said. A beam of energy shot from one of the scout ships, grazing the Defiant's hull. The ship shuddered. "Shields down to 40% from just that glancing hit," Summers reported. "Return to your planet," Commander Yex said. "Tell your leaders that the Valkyrian Empire has claimed your system. You have 30 of your Earth days to prepare for our arrival and your formal submission. Resistance will result in your species' extinction." The communication cut off. The alien ships turned with precision and accelerated away. "Damage report," Miller ordered, his mind racing. "Drive systems damage," Collins replied. "We can make it home, but it won't be a smooth ride." Miller looked at his crew's worried faces. "Then let's get moving. Earth needs to know what's coming." The U.S. Defiant limped back to Earth. The quantum drive sparked and whined. Engineer Lisa Collins worked day and night to keep it running. Captain Miller rarely left the bridge. When Earth finally appeared on their view screen, The entire crew cheered. "We made it," Frank Summers said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not all of us," Miller replied quietly. They had lost 2 crew members when the Valkyrian weapon hit their ship. Space Command ordered them to dock at the orbital station rather than land. As soon as they arrived, armed guards escorted Miller and his senior officers to a shuttle bound for Earth. No one would tell them anything, but Miller knew this wasn't standard procedure. 3 hours later, they sat in a large underground room. The United Earth Defense Council had gathered, 12 men and women who controlled Earth's military forces. Admiral Diane Powell, the head of the council, stood at the front of the room. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her face looked tired. "Captain Miller," she said, "please tell everyone what you told me." Miller stood and described their encounter with the Valkyrian Empire. He explained their threat and the 30-day deadline. When he finished, the room was silent. "Can we negotiate?" asked one council member. "They made it clear they don't see us as equals," Miller answered. "They only want our surrender." "What about our defense fleet?" asked another council member. "We have over 200 warships." Admiral Powell shook her head. Based on Captain Miller's sensor readings of just 3 of their scout ships, their technology is far beyond ours. Our entire fleet wouldn't stand a chance against their armada. Panic filled the room. People talked over each other. Some wanted to surrender to save lives. Others wanted to fight even if it meant losing. Admiral Powell banged her hand on the table. "Quiet. We have one option you don't know about." The room fell silent. Powell pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the table. It showed 5 spacecraft, each with a different design. "Project Phoenix," Powell said. 5 prototype ships, each testing technology that was deemed too experimental or unstable for regular use. Miller leaned forward. "I thought the Defiant was our most advanced ship." "The Defiant was our most advanced ship cleared for long-range missions," Hall corrected. "These 5 ships use technology even more cutting-edge, but also more unstable and dangerous." She pointed to each ship in turn. "The Thunderbolt, with experimental plasma weapons. The Phantom, testing advanced stealth systems. The Ironclad, with quantum shielding. The Quicksilver, with new propulsion technology. And the Vindicator, our newest prototype incorporating lessons from all the others." "With all respect, Admiral," Lisa Collins said, "even with advanced technology, how can 5 ships defeat an empire that controls hundreds of star systems?" Powell looked at her. "They can't. Not in a conventional battle. But we're not fighting a conventional battle." She nodded to a man sitting quietly in the corner. He stood and walked to the front. He was tall and thin with intelligent eyes. "This is Alan Ford, our chief military strategist," Powell said. Ford spoke softly, but everyone listened closely. "The Valkyrians believe they know our capabilities. They think we're primitive and predictable. Their arrogance is their weakness. We won't win with superior firepower. We'll win with surprise and ingenuity." He turned to Miller. "Captain, you've faced them. You know what we're up against. I want you to command the Vindicator." Miller felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "What about my crew from the Defiant?" "Those who volunteer can join you," Powell said. "The rest of the ships will need experienced officers too." Ford looked around the room. "We have 28 days to prepare. It won't be easy, and not everyone will survive. But Earth will not surrender." Miller nodded. "When do we start?" The massive underground hangar buzzed with activity. 5 prototype ships stood in separate bays, each surrounded by engineers and technicians. Captain Miller walked with Admiral Powell and Alan Ford, looking at each vessel in turn. "The Thunderbolt," Powell said as they approached the first ship. It was sleek and angular with forward-facing cannons that glowed with faint blue light. "Captain John Martinez will command it. The plasma cascade weapons can theoretically punch through shields that block regular weapons." Miller studied the ship. "Theoretically. They've never been tested in actual combat," Ford admitted. None of these have. They moved to the next bay. This ship was oddly shaped, its hull covered in dark panels that seemed to drink in the light. The Phantom, Powell explained. Commander Amy Rodriguez is in charge. The stealth systems bend light and sensor readings around the ship. When it works, it's completely invisible. And when it doesn't work, Miller asked, it creates a power surge that leaves the ship vulnerable for several minutes, Ford said. It's a gamble. The third ship was bulkier than the others, with a reinforced hull. The Ironclad, under Captain Eric Jackson, Powell said. Quantum shielding that creates multiple defense layers in different dimensions. In theory, it can withstand hits that would destroy any other ship. Miller nodded, noticing a pattern. Every advantage comes with a risk. Exactly, Ford said. That's why conventional military wouldn't approve these designs, but desperate times call for desperate measures. They walked to the fourth bay. This ship was the smallest, with an unusual engine configuration. The Quicksilver, Powell said. Commander Susan Wright. It can outrun anything in space and make turns that would tear apart normal ships. The inertial dampeners are experimental. If they fail, the crew would be crushed by G-forces. Finally, they reached the fifth bay. Miller looked up at his new command. The Vindicator was larger than the Defiant but smaller than a standard battleship. Its design incorporated elements from all the other prototypes. We've installed an enhanced quantum displacement system based on the Defiant's data, a woman's voice said from behind them. Miller turned to see a tall woman with short dark hair and intense eyes. Dr. Olivia Bennett, Powell introduced her. Our chief scientist for Project Phoenix. Bennett shook Miller's hand. Your data from the encounter with the Valkyrians was invaluable. We've made modifications to all systems based on their weapon signatures and shield frequencies. Will it be enough? Miller asked. Bennett's expression was grim. Honestly, I don't know, but we have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? Miller asked. Human creativity, she replied. The Valkyrians rely on established technology they've used for centuries. We're creating new solutions every day. Ford nodded. We've been studying your encounter. The Valkyrians follow predictable patterns and formations. They don't adapt quickly because they've rarely needed to. A technician approach. Dr. Bennett, we need you at the Thunderbolt. The plasma containment is fluctuating again. Bennett sighed. Excuse me, we're working around the clock, but there are still bugs to fix. After she left, Powell turned to Miller. Your crew assignments have been finalized. Lisa Collins will be your chief engineer. Frank Summers requested transfer to the Phantom as tactical officer, but I can override that if you want to keep him. No, Miller said. Let him go where he thinks he can help most. Powell handed Miller a tablet. These are your orders. We're launching in 72 hours, ready or not. Miller took the tablet. What's the plan once we launch? Ford smiled slightly. We give the Valkyrians exactly what they expect. At first. Then we show them what humans can really do. Miller looked back at the Vindicator. 3 days isn't much time. It's all we have, Powell said. The Valkyrian fleet was detected crossing the outer solar system this morning. They're not waiting the full 30 days. Miller felt a chill. Then we better get to work. The Valkyrian fleet appeared like stars being born. First one ship, then 10, then hundreds, then thousands. They emerged from something that looked like a tear in space near the orbit of Mars. Earth's long-range sensors tracked them, sending data back to the Defense Command Center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Powell and Alan Ford watched the main screen with grim faces. Behind them, dozens of officers and analysts worked at computer stations, their faces lit by blue screens. Final count is 3,422 ships, an analyst reported. Most are warships. Some appear to be troop carriers. Ford's face was pale. They could have sent 1/10 of that fleet and still beaten us easily. They want to make a point, Powell said. They want to crush our spirit as much as our military. A communications officer spoke up. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Valkyrian fleet. It's being broadcast on all Earth frequencies. Powell nodded. Put it on screen. The main display changed to show a Valkyrian with elaborate markings on his blue skin. His black eyes seemed to look directly at each person in the room. People of Earth, he said, his voice translated by computers. I am Grand Admiral Zex Keller of the Valkyrian Imperial Fleet. Your primitive scouts have encountered our border patrols, so you know who we are. The Valkyrian Empire has ruled this sector of the galaxy for 2,000 years. Many species have joined our empire, some willingly, most not. Zex Keller's face was replaced by images of planets being bombarded from orbit, cities burning, alien species in chains. Resistance is not merely futile, the Grand Admiral continued as his face reappeared. It is illogical. Submit now, and many of your people will live as useful servants. Resist, and we will reduce your cities to ash. The transmission cut off. The room was silent for several seconds. Send the response we prepared, Powell ordered. On screens across Earth, and to the Valkyrian fleet, the President of Earth appeared. She spoke of peace, of cooperation, of Earth's desire to join the galactic community as equals, not slaves. She asked for more time to prepare Earth for this new reality. The Valkyrians responded with laughter. Zex Keller appeared again, visibly amused. You mistake us for diplomats, he said. We are conquerors. To demonstrate our power, we will now destroy your pitiful defense fleet orbiting your planet. Without warning, a group of Valkyrian ships broke formation and accelerated toward Earth. They approached the 50 Earth warships in orbit and opened fire. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. All 50 Earth ships were destroyed or disabled. Primitive weapons, Zex Keller mocked in another broadcast. Primitive tactics. Is this truly the best defense of your homeworld? Our scans show you have other ships hiding in your atmosphere. Send them out now. Let us see what else you can offer before we claim your world. In the command center, Powell turned to Ford. They detected our conventional fleet in the atmosphere, but not the prototypes underground. That gives us one advantage. Ford nodded. A small one. Launch the prototypes as planned. Yes, Powell decided, but tell the pilots of our conventional ships to delay their attack. Let's not show all our cards at once. She opened a secure channel to the underground hangar. Captain Miller, this is Admiral Powell. The Valkyrians have destroyed our orbital fleet. They're asking us to send out our remaining ships. Launch the prototypes in 30 minutes. Operation Last Stand is a go. In the hangar, Miller received the message while standing on the bridge of the Vindicator. He looked at his crew, most of them young and nervous. This is it, he told them. The Valkyrians think they know what humanity is capable of. Let's show them how wrong they are. Around him, the prototype ships hummed to life, their experimental systems powering up. Engineers and technicians ran final checks, some praying quietly at their stations. In 30 minutes, Earth's fate would rest in the hands of 5 untested ships and their crews. 5 prototype ships rose from Earth's surface, breaking through clouds as they climbed toward space. On the bridge of the Vindicator, Captain Miller watched his display as the other ships took their positions around his. All ships reporting ready, Captain, said his communications officer. Miller nodded. Open a channel to all ships. When the channel opened, Miller spoke clearly. This is Captain Miller. We all know the odds. We all know what happens if we fail. Remember your training. Remember the plan. And remember, the Valkyrians think they know what we're capable of. They're wrong. The 5 ships moved into formation, heading toward the massive Valkyrian fleet that waited beyond Earth's moon. On the Thunderbolt, Captain Martinez checked his weapon systems one last time. On the Phantom, Commander Rodriguez prepared her stealth drive. On the Ironclad, Captain Jackson activated his shield systems. On the Quicksilver, Commander Wright ran final checks on her engines. In the Valkyrian command ship, Grand Admiral Zex Killar watched the approaching Earth vessels with amusement. "Only 5 ships," he said to his officers. "Scan them." A Valkyrian officer worked his console. "They appear to be experimental vessels, Admiral. Each has unusual power signatures. They may be prototypes." Zex Killar laughed. "They send untested ships against us. This is beyond insulting. It is comedy." He opened a channel to his fleet. "Let them approach. Do not fire until I give the order. I want them to see our full might before they die." The 5 Earth ships moved closer. The Valkyrians could now see them clearly on their screens. "Their designs are unusual," an officer noted. "Unusual does not mean effective," Zex Killar replied. "Primitive species often build strange weapons in their desperation." Miller's voice came through the Earth ship's secure channel. "Execute Phase 1. Immediately, the Phantom engaged its stealth systems and vanished from view. The Quicksilver suddenly accelerated to incredible speed, moving in a pattern designed to confuse Valkyrian sensors. The Ironclad moved to a defensive position, its shields glowing with energy. The Thunderbolt's weapons began to glow with bright blue light. "Now they try to impress us with tricks," Zex Killar said. "Enough games. Target all 5 ships and fire." Thousands of Valkyrian weapons fired at once. The space between the fleets lit up with energy beams and missiles. The Quicksilver dodged most attacks, its incredible speed making it almost impossible to hit. The Ironclad's shields took multiple hits but held, though they flickered dangerously. The Vindicator was hit twice, but its modified shields absorbed most of the damage. The Phantom suddenly reappeared right in the middle of a Valkyrian formation, its stealth systems failing at the worst possible moment. "Stealth systems offline." Commander Rodriguez shouted to her crew. "Power surge in main systems." The Phantom was suddenly visible and vulnerable among dozens of enemy ships. Valkyrian weapons targeted it from all directions. "Phantom is in trouble," Miller said. "Thunderbolt, provide covering fire. Quicksilver, prepare for extraction." The Thunderbolt fired its plasma cascade weapons for the first time in actual combat. The blue energy beams cut through space and struck 3 Valkyrian ships. To everyone's surprise, the beams passed right through the Valkyrian shields and tore into their hulls. "Direct hits," Martinez reported excitedly. "Their shields didn't stop our plasma weapons." For the first time, Zex Killar looked concerned. "What was that? How did they penetrate our shields?" The Quicksilver raced to the Phantom's position, drawing fire away from the vulnerable ship. It moved so fast that Valkyrian targeting systems couldn't lock onto it. The Earth ships had scored their first small victory, but it came at a cost. The Phantom's systems were failing, the Ironclad's shields were weakening, and the Thunderbolt's weapons were overheating after just 3 shots. Miller looked at his tactical display. They had destroyed or damaged only 7 Valkyrian ships out of thousands. They needed something more if they were going to survive, let alone win. "Phase 2, Miller ordered. "All ships, fall back to position Alpha. Prepare for coordinated attack pattern." The human ships began to retreat, pulling back toward Earth. The Valkyrians followed, exactly as Alan Ford had predicted they would. The prototype ships retreated toward Earth with the Valkyrian fleet in pursuit. On the Vindicator's bridge, Captain Miller watched his tactical display with intense focus. The plan was working so far. The Valkyrians were following them exactly as Alan Ford had predicted. "Captain, incoming transmission from Dr. Bennett at command," the communications officer reported. Miller nodded. "Put her through." Dr. Bennett's face appeared on screen. She looked tired but excited. "Captain, I've been analyzing the data from your engagement. There's something unusual about the Valkyrian shields." "We noticed," Miller replied. "The Thunderbolt's plasma weapons went right through them." "That's just it," Bennett said. "Their shields operate on fixed frequencies. When hit by certain energy patterns, they resonate at specific harmonics. I think that's why the plasma weapons worked. The energy frequency was something their shields weren't designed to block." Lisa Collins, now serving as Miller's chief engineer, looked up from her station. If we could find the right combination of frequencies. Exactly, Bennett said. Their technology is advanced but rigid. They've used the same shield designs for centuries because no one could penetrate them, until now. Miller considered this information. Can you determine what frequencies would be most effective? Working on it, Bennett replied. But I need more data. You need to hit their shields with different weapons and energy types so I can analyze the results. Miller turned to his tactical officer. Relay this to all ships. We need to test different weapon configurations against the Valkyrian shields. As the Earth ships reached position Alpha, a point just beyond Earth's moon, they turned to face the pursuing Valkyrians. The damaged Phantom had managed emergency repairs, and its weapons were still operational, even if its stealth systems weren't. All ships, commence firing, Miller ordered. Vary your weapon configurations as instructed. The Earth ships launched a barrage of different weapons: conventional missiles, energy beams, plasma bursts, and quantum torpedoes. Most were blocked by Valkyrian shields, but the Earth ship's sensors recorded exactly how each shield reacted. In the Valkyrian command ship, Grand Admiral Zexkilar watched with growing irritation. They're just firing randomly, he said. What strategy is this? His science officer studied his readings. Sir, they appear to be testing our shield responses. I recommend changing our shield harmonics. Unnecessary, Zexkilar dismissed him. Their primitive weapons are no threat. Press the attack and finish this. The Valkyrian ships moved forward in a tight formation, their weapons charging. But just as they prepared to fire, the Quicksilver suddenly accelerated to an impossible speed, racing in a complex pattern around the Valkyrian formation. What is that ship doing? Zexkilar demanded. On the Quicksilver, Commander Wright pushed her experimental engines to their limits. Her ship moved so fast it appeared as just a blur on sensors, drawing the Valkyrians' attention and fire. Meanwhile, the Thunderbolt moved into position behind a large group of Valkyrian ships. In position, Martinez reported from the Thunderbolt. Ready to fire on your mark. Miller checked his display. The Valkyrians had formed exactly the pattern Ford had predicted, a standard offensive formation they had used for centuries. Dr. Bennett, Miller called. What have you got for us? Bennett's voice came through excitedly. The pattern is clear. Their shields resonate most strongly when hit by alternating frequencies of plasma and quantum energy. Miller didn't waste time. Thunderbolt, target their rear section with plasma cannons. Ironclad, follow immediately with quantum torpedoes at the same targets. The Thunderbolt fired its plasma weapons at the rear of the Valkyrian formation. As before, the beams passed through their shields, causing damage to several ships. Seconds later, the Ironclad launched quantum torpedoes at the same targets. What happened next surprised everyone. When the quantum torpedoes hit the ships already struck by plasma, the energy didn't just damage them. It created a cascading energy reaction that jumped from ship to ship, disrupting shield systems on 12 Valkyrian vessels at once. It worked, Collins exclaimed. The combination created a resonance cascade. On his command ship, Zexkilar stood up in alarm. What just happened? How did they disable 12 ships with 2 weapon strikes? His science officer worked frantically at his console. Unknown, Admiral. Their weapons somehow created a feedback loop in our shield harmonics. For the first time, Zexkilar felt a flicker of concern. These humans are more clever than we thought. All ships, change formation. Target their weapon ships first. Miller allowed himself a small smile. Phase 3 is a go. All ships, execute pattern Omega. Dr. Bennett, keep analyzing their responses. We need to stay one step ahead of them. The Earth ships changed formation, moving with surprising coordination for experimental vessels. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the Valkyrians arrived, there was a glimmer of hope. Grand Admiral Zexkilar paced on his command ship. The battle was not going as planned. The humans' strange ships had destroyed over 30 Valkyrian vessels now. It was still only a tiny fraction of his fleet, but it was 30 more than should have been possible. Change tactics, Zexkiller ordered. All ships spread out. Do not maintain close formations. Target each Earth ship with multiple attack vectors. The Valkyrian fleet began to disperse, breaking their tight formations. This would make the resonance cascade less effective, since it couldn't jump as easily between widely separated ships. In the Earth Defense Command Center, Alan Ford watched the Valkyrian movement on the main screen. "They're adapting," he said to Admiral Powell. "Faster than we expected." Powell nodded grimly. "Can our ships counter?" "They're trying," Ford replied. Out in space, the Earth prototypes struggled with the new Valkyrian formation. The Thunderbolt and Ironclad could no longer create large chain reactions with their weapons. The Phantom's repaired stealth systems kept failing after just minutes of use. The Quicksilver was taking hits as the spread-out Valkyrian ships made its evasive patterns less effective. On the Vindicator, Miller received damage reports from all ships. "We're losing ground," his tactical officer reported. "The Ironclad's shields are down to 20%. The Thunderbolt's plasma weapons are overheating." Miller knew they needed something more. "Lisa, what's the status of our main weapon?" Collins looked up from her engineering station. "The quantum displacement cannon is charged, but we've never fired it. The simulations show a 60% chance it will work as designed, and a 40% chance it will overload our systems." "Those aren't great odds," Miller said. "No," Collins agreed, "but they're better than our chances of winning this battle conventionally." Miller opened a channel to Dr. Bennett. "Doctor, we're considering using the Vindicator's main weapon. Any thoughts?" Bennett's face appeared on screen. "Based on what we've learned about their shield harmonics, the quantum displacement cannon might work even better than designed. Their shields have no defense against that kind of spatial disruption. Or it might blow us up," Collins added. "There is that risk," Bennett admitted. Miller made his decision. "We need to get most of their ships in range. That means we need them to concentrate their forces again." He opened a channel to all Earth ships. "This is Captain Miller. New plan. The Vindicator will appear to be crippled. The rest of you attack aggressively, then retreat to draw their forces toward us." On the Ironclad, Captain Jackson responded, "Understood. Playing bait." The Ironclad, Thunderbolt, Phantom, and Quicksilver suddenly launched an all-out attack on the nearest Valkyrian ships. They struck hard, destroying several more enemy vessels, then turned and fled in different directions. Zexkiller watched with growing anger. "They're becoming desperate. The small ships are trying to distract us while the larger one sits there." He pointed at the Vindicator, which had powered down its engines and appeared to be drifting. "Should we pursue the attacking ships?" an officer asked. "No," Zexkiller said, his eyes narrowing. "They want us to chase them. Instead, we will destroy their command ship." He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships, converge on the large Earth vessel. I want it destroyed completely." Hundreds of Valkyrian ships began moving toward the seemingly helpless Vindicator. On the Vindicator's bridge, Miller watched the enemy fleet approaching. They took the bait. All power to the quantum displacement cannon. Shields at minimum. We need every bit of energy for the weapon. The ship hummed as power flowed to its main weapon. Warning lights flashed across control panels. "Cannon charged to 85%, Collins reported. 90%. 95%. The Valkyrian ships formed a massive attack formation around the Vindicator, their weapons charging. "They're preparing to fire," the tactical officer warned. Miller kept his eyes on the readout. "Hold position. Wait for maximum concentration of enemy ships." Zexkiller smiled as his fleet surrounded the Earth ship. "Fire on my command." He raised his hand, ready to give the order that would destroy the Vindicator and crush Earth's resistance. "Cannon charge to 100%, Collins announced. "It's now or never, Captain." Miller took a deep breath. Fire. The Vindicator's quantum displacement cannon fired. There was no bright beam, no explosion, just a strange ripple that spread outward from the ship like a stone dropped in still water. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Did it work? Someone on the bridge asked. Then space itself seemed to twist around the Valkyrian ships. Their shields flickered with strange colors, then shut down completely. Weapon systems went dark. Engines failed. On the Valkyrian command ship, alarms blared. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Zex Kalar was thrown from his chair as the ship shuddered. "What's happening?" he demanded, pulling himself up. "Report." His science officer stared at his failing screens in disbelief. "It's some kind of quantum disruption field. It's affecting our shield harmonics across all frequencies at once." Zex Kalar watched in horror as his ships began to drift, powerless. Some collided with each other, causing explosions that damaged more vessels. The magnificent Valkyrian fleet was suddenly in chaos. On the Vindicator, the lights dimmed and emergency systems activated. Smoke poured from several control panels. "Engine systems failing," Collins reported, coughing through the smoke. "Power grid severely damaged. The cannon overloaded just like we feared." Miller opened a channel to the other Earth ships. "The Vindicator is badly damaged. The quantum weapon worked, but we can't maintain the field for long. Attack now, while their shields are down." The Thunderbolt, Ironclad, Phantom, and Quicksilver raced back into battle. With the Valkyrian shields disabled, their weapons tore through the enemy hulls with ease. For the first time, the battle was turning decisively in Earth's favor. In the Defense Command Center, Powell and Ford watched in amazement. "It's working," Ford said quietly. "It's actually working." Powell nodded, but her expression remained serious. "The Vindicator can't hold out much longer. Look at those power readings." On the Vindicator, systems were shutting down one by one. The quantum field was draining all available power, and the ship was beginning to break apart. "Hull breach on Deck 4, the tactical officer reported. "Life support failing on Decks 2 and 3. Miller made a hard decision. "Begin evacuation. All non-essential crew to escape pods now." He turned to Collins. "How long can we maintain the field?" She checked her readings. "Maybe 10 more minutes before catastrophic failure." "That should be enough," Miller said. He opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain. Evacuate the ship. Repeat, evacuate the ship." As crew members ran for escape pods, Miller remained on the bridge with a skeleton crew. They worked to maintain the quantum field as long as possible. On his damaged command ship, Zex Killer saw his fleet being destroyed piece by piece. More than half his ships were now disabled or destroyed. He made a desperate decision. "Divert all remaining power to engines," he ordered. "Set course for the Earth ship that's creating the field. We will ram them." His command ship's engines flared to life, pushing through the quantum disruption as it headed straight for the Vindicator. Miller saw the threat on his tactical display. Valkyrian command ship on collision course. Evasive maneuvers. "No power for engines," Collins replied grimly. "We're dead in space." Miller looked at the few officers who had stayed with him. "The rest of you, get to the escape pods." "That's an order." Collins shook her head. "Not leaving, Captain." The others nodded their agreement. They would stay together. Miller thought quickly. "If we can't move, maybe we can use that against them. Lisa, can we create a controlled overload of the quantum field?" Collins' eyes widened. "You mean cause it to collapse inward? That would create a temporary singularity. It would destroy us and anything near us." "Can you do it?" Miller asked. She worked frantically at her console. "Yes, I can set it to collapse when the Valkyrian ship is almost on top of us." "Do it," Miller ordered. As the Valkyrian command ship bore down on them, Collins made the final adjustments. The quantum field began to pulse strangely, drawing inward toward the Vindicator. Zex Kalar realized too late what was happening. Pull back, he screamed, but it was too late. His ship was caught in the collapsing field. The quantum singularity formed in a silent flash of light. The Vindicator and the Valkyrian command ship simply ceased to exist, along with dozens of nearby enemy vessels. When the light faded, the remaining Valkyrian ships began to retreat. Without their leader, without their command structure, they fled in disarray. On Earth, people watched as the Valkyrian fleet disappeared from their sensors. In the Defense Command Center, Powell stood silently, looking at the empty space where the Vindicator had been. "They did it," Ford said. "They saved Earth." A year later, a memorial stood in Washington, D.C. It honored Captain Miller and the crews who had given their lives. It showed 5 ships, the prototypes that had saved humanity. Beneath them was a simple inscription. They mocked what they didn't understand. We prevailed because of what they couldn't imagine.